Good evening, and welcome to the fifth night, Friday night of Venerable Robina's visit to Kadampa Center. We're very happy to have you here, and we're very happy to have her here. And this is the first night of a 3-day weekend workshop. She'll be continuing all day Saturday and then Sunday afternoon on the workshop. And we have this booklet for the workshop. It's right outside the door there. If you're in a couple, please share because we have a lot of people here. And if you're not going to stay for the workshop, go ahead and take one tonight and think about returning it in case we have a lot of people over the weekend. Thank you. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with our habit here at Kadampa Center, when the teacher enters the room, we stand out of respect for the teacher and the teachings that she carries. And then the teacher will do a prostration in front of the altar. Venerable Robina's knees are bothering her, so she's just doing a short prostration. And we wait until she is seated. And then those of us who wish to will prostrate. But if this is new and uncomfortable for you, just stand until we're all ready to have a seat. We have some interesting things to look at. If you heard the music when you came in, that was on this CD. This is Venerable Robina and students from another FPMT center in Australia who are chanting Buddhist prayers. It's quite lovely, and there are still a couple of them left out in the bookstore area for sale. And the proceeds for the CD go to Venerable Robina's Bodhicitta Trust. Also for sale is this quite amazing DVD. It's The Life of Venerable Robina. This was put together by her nephew quite a few years ago and then updated again more recently. Her story is very interesting, and this is really good viewing. So that's also for sale out there. I think both the CD and the DVD are $12. And again, this one also, the proceeds go to the Bodhicitta Trust. Also, this is the advertising portion of the night. Venerable Robina also leads a couple of really amazing trips in India and Nepal each year. In India and both India and Nepal, she leads a month-long pilgrimage. You get more information about it here, and a link to a website that can tell you even more. This trip is really quite amazing. Close to a couple of dozen of Kadampa Center people have been on the trip more than once. It's really life-changing. You spend an entire month in Venerable Robina's presence. She gives teachings. She leads you through all kinds of amazing holy sites in Buddhist holy sites in northern India. Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha became enlightened. Vulture Peak, where he gave the teaching on enlightenment. Varanasi, where he passed from this life. It's really, really an amazing trip. So consider going on this. It's quite amazing. And then there's the Laudo trek. Laudo is up in the Himalayas. This is the area where Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is the founder of our sister organization, FPMT, he was born there. And there's a cave up there. Laura here has been on that trip, and she can tell you more about it. And it's really quite amazing that at the age of 74, Venerable Robina is still leading these trips and pilgrimages. So take advantage of them while they're available. Oh, and then, no. I mentioned the books, didn't I? Then I'm done. We can just enjoy ourselves and wait for Venerable Robina to get here. Thanks.
All right. All here. Oh, and I hope to see everybody. So if you move your chair, if you can't see me, I want to see you all. Move your chair, Tia. Move over. I can't see you. You've got to stretch your neck. Then we'll have to do your treatment. Okay. So here we are, preparing. This is part of the weekend, isn't it? But I mean, you can just do tonight if you want to, can't you? Yes, that's perfect. Nothing wrong. Okay. So, okay. So I'll start with our little prayer, and it's got two parts. The first part is, as I've always say, it's in Tibetan. The first two lines are just for those of us in the room who already have, are already committed to being a Buddhist, have decided they're a Buddhist. It's reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. It's just, as take refuge, as we say. And the second two lines can be for all of us. It's really stating an altruistic motivation, or stating our purpose, an altruistic purpose for our being here together. And basically, as I say every night, it's you're thinking you're going to listen. We're going to listen to these ideas coming from the Buddha via the Tibetan tradition. To hear it as advice. As I always say, Buddha's not the boss. He's not a creator. So we are the boss. We are the boss. So we can decide if we want to take the advice. But it is advice. And so it's advice for what? Well, essentially two things. One is to help us develop what for the Buddha is our really quite extraordinary potential, which we've been discussing all week, which I'll start with tonight as a starting point of the whole weekend. Our extraordinary potential for less neurosis, less fear, less ego, less drama, less anger, less depression, less anxiety, more kindness, more compassion, more wisdom, more clarity. This is quite literally the most simplest of words, what the Buddhist path is about. Bottom line. For our own sake, because we all want to be happy, and because we all live in this crazy world together, for the sake of others. Very simple. As we always say, a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So we're going to listen, with this in mind. And that includes me. I'm saying it, but believe me, I'm listening. I promise, Sangye charang soke chognamla jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye charang soke chognamla jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog Sangye charang soke chognamla jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog. Okay. So maybe what I'll do tonight, as a prelude to the weekend, but also can be self-contained, is like the essence of the main points of the path from beginning to end, from A to Z. A to Z. And this is something, as we all know, if we've been around a few times here, and if you've heard the Tibetan Buddhist approach, this is coming from this particular way of the Tibetans have packaged Buddha's teachings. One of the real expertise of the Tibetans has been the way they've really packaged the teachings in a very coherent, orderly way. So I always say, and I think it's really true, we don't tend to think of a spiritual path as being incremental. Like if you're going to study music, you know perfectly well it's incremental. You begin at the baby stuff, you go to the middle stuff, and you go to the most advanced, and then you graduate. We get that with everything we've ever learned, whether it's even just anything at all. You do a 6-month massage course. You start simple, you get to the more advanced. But we don't tend to think of a spiritual path like that, which is kind of interesting. But if we take the Tibetan Buddhist, or the Buddhist approach in general, but the way the Tibetan Buddhists have packaged the teachings, this is really taking this into consideration. And when we understand it, it's extremely powerful, extremely helpful for us. Because, I mean, we know ourselves, being Americans, being Australians, being whatever, and here's Buddhism, which has been safely kept in Asia very comfortably for several thousand years, and then suddenly it's in the West, dumped in our laps, you know. It's quite shocking for us and quite surprising and quite hard to understand. I mean, I absolutely, when I first heard the teachings from Lama Zopa, way back, many years ago, on the one side I heard his words, but on the other hand I could not understand a word he was saying. It was so arcane, it was so abstract. I kept saying to myself, kind of, where's the Buddhism? I mean, I must have had a lot of misconceptions about Buddhism, because I don't know what I was expecting, but I had no idea what he was talking about, you know. I sensed there was something there, so I persevered. So here I am all these years later, but it really takes us the time to unpack this stuff, you know. So, I mean, in one sense, it's really simple what we're trying to accomplish. We look at the big picture point of view. And what we're trying to accomplish is expressed perfectly in the word Buddha. I think the Sanskrit the same. Buddha is Sanskrit, but the Tibetan equivalent, this I do know. I don't speak Tibetan, but I know that the equivalent, Sangye, the etymology of this word is very tasty. It tells us exactly the end result, which implies the method, if we hear it. And it seems deceptively simple, but it's good to have it on the ground, you know. So the word Sangye, Sang implies, and we've discussed this week, we've said it, you know. Sang implies the utter eradication from one's being, from one's consciousness, from one's mind. Mind and consciousness in Buddhism are virtually synonymous. The utter eradication from one's mind of all ego, all fears, all neuroses, all depression, all jealousy, all anxiety, all attachment, you name it, all the stuff that we know, that we've been discussing all week, that we recognize, that we're familiar with, that we recognize since we're born, that are so normal, such that in our culture, in our modern psychological models of the mind, this stuff is considered to be a normal part of a normal person. And there is no view in any of our psychological models, and certainly not in neuroscience, that would suggest anything remotely like that we can utterly get rid of this stuff, because the Buddha's own experiential finding from his own experience, he is not a creator, the teachings are not revelation, it did not come from on high, it is not a belief system, it is a doable job. And the Buddha was the one who did it at this time, and then has presented his findings, presented his methodology. He says, over to you guys, this is what I achieved, over to you if you want to achieve the same thing. Follow the same steps, baby. And that's exactly how we learn everything. There's nothing surprising about it, you know. Bach gives us his music, I did it this, here you go, you do the same. Well, it's nothing surprising for us, we get this approach. But not only can we get rid of that stuff, as mad as it sounds, initially it's a shock to us. But not only that, but the second syllable, ge, implies the development to perfection of everything else in our mind. And what's that? We all know them. Love, kindness, compassion, clarity, wisdom, joy, you name it. The stuff that we are also familiar with to one degree or another. Every one of those words is nothing cosmic for us. We recognize those. So this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. I mean, Western psychology does not talk in such simple terms. We've made up lots of other terms. Nothing wrong, I'm not complaining. But Buddha, very comfortably, 2,500 years later, it's still the same. This is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. And this is Buddha's finding. But the word seems simple, but when you analyze it, it's very shocking. It's quite a radical concept. And I remember I mentioned this week, one person a few weeks ago, someplace where she heard this, she was completely shocked. She said, that's insanity. What are you talking about? Which is just a good point, because it's true. We can't even conceive of not having some anger, some jealousy, some depression, some anxiety, or anybody else being this way. It's just, and we do, in our models of the mind in the modern world, and in our neuroscience, there's no view remotely like the Buddha's that would suggest that this stuff is not at the core of our being. In Buddhist psychology, they say it's adventitious. It's not intrinsic to who we are. This is very shocking, because we think the exact opposite. In fact, we think you'd be abnormal if you didn't have this stuff. But that's how radical Buddha's view is. So we should be really shocked to hear this. And it's either totally inspiring, or we think, what a load of rubbish, and walk away because it's too shocking. So this is so powerful. This is the word. This is the end result. So that tells us the method. It tells us the fundamental method. This stuff is what we know as our mind. So if we can get rid of all the rubbish, and why should we, by the way? Well, Buddha's found that it's the cause of all our suffering. Guess what? And why should we develop all the other stuff? Because that's the source of our happiness. One way of framing the whole of the Buddha's path from A to Z again is in terms of being a path to stop suffering and get happiness. Absolutely is that. Another way of presenting it is it's a system of ethics. Another way of presenting it is a method to get rid of ignorance and to get wisdom. They all come to the same thing. So we'll take through the weekend, certainly, but we'll go into those different doorways. But they all come to the same thing, which is really fascinating. And the Buddha would say that it's not possible to get wisdom and get rid of ignorance without having ethics. And it's not possible to practice ethics without becoming happy. And it's not possible to stop suffering without getting wisdom and without practicing ethics. So it all comes, it's just different doorways into the same thing. And it's very powerful. And what we have to learn to do is not just believe it, but see the logic of it. And this is a major point. I talk about it all the time, but it's unbelievably important for us because we have to analyze and unpack these concepts. And this concept always in particular is so powerful. For me, it's so important. We hear religion, look at us, all these pictures, look at these pictures, I always joke about all our pictures, look at the Tibetan Buddhist, Indian, look at it, leaves the Catholics for dead. Sometimes you see some Tibetan Gompas you can't believe, there's not an inch of space, it's not covered in things, It's got meaning, it's got great meaning. But what I'm saying is, it's religion. Okay, here, look at religion. Here we are, here's religion. I'm a nun, I sang a prayer, it must be religion. Nothing wrong. You ask a Tibetan, are you religious? Of course I say I'm a religious. Oh, you believe in God, do you? Who? No, they don't have a concept of a creator. And that's the shocking part. That's the shocking part, So that's what we have to really get the meaning of. The implication of that point is kind of tasty. I always quote this, on this week I'm sure I've said it. I've got a Jesuit priest friend, and I love discussing these things with him, and I'm being an old Catholic as well. I asked him, I said, by definition, what is a sin? The Buddhists would call it negative action. What is a sin? He said, by definition, what defines it as wrong is that God said not to do it. Now that is absolutely perfect. If you have the view of a creator who is the superior being, who does run the universe, who is the boss, who did create me, who did create the laws, who did create everything, and who is in charge, who is the boss, that's completely fitting. In just the same way in your mother's household. Don't do that, she says. We say, why not? We know her answer. Same as God, same as Jesus, because I say so. So that's our view of morality, that someone else whether we think it's your mother or God or the police or the government, we think of morality in general, ethics in general, morality as a bunch of things that someone is squashing on top of us, telling us not to do that. And if you do, it's implied you will get punished. That view is completely in our mind. Now that's valid if you believe in a creator, a superior being who runs the universe, who caused the universe, who created the universe. And fine in your mother's household, she is the boss. You make your bed, and if you don't, you get punished. That's the way it is. Now the point though, for this my priest friend, he said there is some aspect of natural law, meaning people don't like getting killed. That's the natural law component. But he said the major component is it's because God said it's against his will. This is really profound, in my opinion. And if you want to live a life, if you want to have faith in God, that's how you live your life. And that's a perfect way to live. It's just not the Buddhist way, that's all. So the Buddhists would say, the Buddha exhorts us, junior school, entry level, grade 1, we're going to discuss the package. Entry level, junior school, grade 1 practice in Buddhism is exactly the same as what Jesus says. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't this, don't that. Good ethics. Like your grandma says, like a good communist would say, don't harm others. It's universal logic. Don't harm others. Now, the Christian reason is because God said. So then you must confess to God and God will forgive you. And forgiveness is what heals you. That's the philosophy. That is perfect. I don't complain about it, but it's not Buddha's. And that, unless we think it through, we just vaguely think it's all the same. And it's not being rude about Christianity. It's just getting it really clear. Because the implication for Buddhism is quite different. Buddha, you ask Buddha what is a negative action, he will tell you the heaviest level of them is it's an action that harms another. And he says it's natural law. In other words, Buddha, because he's not a creator, he came out of this amazing, I always quote, as I told you before, we've discussed, this amazing Indian system from all him, these extraordinary thinkers, amazing beings, great yogis, thinkers, philosophers, meditators, incredibly sophisticated thinkers with astonishing view of the universe, Like I always joke about us, Christian, Jewish people know nothing about him. We know about the Greeks. That's about it. We know nothing about Africa, nothing about China, nothing about India, nothing about 2/3 of the universe, 4/5 of the universe, sorry. You understand? So Buddha came out of that one. Unbelievable. He went as far as he could go in that amazing system, got to the highest point. Then he said there was still something left that he felt was not dealt with. So then he diverged in his own direction. And since 2,500 years has been what we call Buddhism, It began first it was in India, of course, and then the Chinese started coming over about the 4th century. And then the 5th, 6th century, 7th century went to Tibet. And then the whole of China and Asia was flooded, was all Buddhist, was all Buddhist. And not until 1959, when the Dalai Lama came out of Tibet, are we really interested in Buddhism in our culture. So it took us that long. It took us this long to get it, 2,500 years later. So for the Buddha, a negative action is one that harms another. That's the heaviest level of negative action. And you say to him, why is it negative? Who says? He says, no one says. Just do your market research. Do you like being killed? Do you like being killed? Do you like being killed? Check the behavior of an ant or a monkey. No, they don't like it either. It's a natural law. He calls it a natural law. This is very shocking for us, because for us it's always imposed upon us. But to hear that it's a natural law means there's no one involved in making it up. No one has created. We're going to use our noggin to observe behavior, to observe beings, to observe what we all want, and we can agree that it's a natural law. That's powerful. That's what we call science, a natural law. So then that's expressed then in great detail in the whole Buddhist view, which is coming from the Indians, of this world view, this whole view of what is happiness, what is suffering, where does it all come from? And according to Buddha, it's the law of karma, which is coming from these great Indians before him. He went as far as he could go and he diverged in his own direction, and he's got his own views about that one. But it's this really sophisticated presentation of the entire universe, how it exists, where it comes from. It's vast. It's not just about good, bad. It's not, in other words, I joke and say it's not just made up by the hippies in the 60s, Karma. It's huge, vast body of knowledge. It's astonishing, but utterly new to us. Nothing like the materialist view, which says you began in your mother's womb and you're made by your mummy and daddy, and nothing like the Christian or Jewish or religious or Islam teachings that say God put a soul there and you began in your mother's womb at the same time. So in both those cases, someone else created you. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. It's fundamentally different. Although on the surface it sort of appears vaguely like religion, But this is a massively important point to think about. I always say we ask the same questions. I always say that. We do all over the world, I promise. We ask the same questions. But there's one person who's ever asked this one question ever so far in my 43 years, once, ever. And it was a scientist, in fact, in New Zealand, in Nelson. And he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? This is a perfect question if you talk about creative religions. Religion being information from on high, from a superior being that you necessarily must believe in. And again, I don't criticize that view. I don't. But it's not the Buddha's, that's all. And he was shocked when I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed relativity to you? The point we've got to try and get to, and it takes us time to get to it, is that the information in Buddhism is coming from the direct experience of the observation of the mind of the person called Buddha and anyone else since then who's done what Buddha did and come to the same result. Like, it's not as if just Einstein has done, and then it sits there up in the sky. Millions of people since then have studied what he'd done and have proved each step of the way what he said. Maybe they found other findings as well. So it's experiential. You do the work. You don't just think it and believe it. That takes a while for us to think about. We get it when it comes to maths. Like, we would never say, oh, I believe in mathematics. We would be laughed at. We know you learn mathematics. But when we think of religion, we think you can learn it, but it's still belief. because you can't prove it, we'll say. And that's the default assumption in our minds, that you can't prove religion. Not for the Buddha's case, not for the Buddha. It's very fascinating. Proof means experience. Like, what you learn 1 + 1 is 2. Your teacher doesn't say, you better believe me. She says, go home, get the information. You've got to have the right information. Go home and do your homework and you will prove it for yourself. That's what we call learning. You don't believe Bach, you play Bach and you experience what Bach has on the piece of paper. You don't believe that 1 + 1 is 2, you prove it to yourself. You don't believe in it, you prove it to yourself. That's what we mean by science, like as if we've discovered that the last couple of hundred years. No, Buddha's having this the whole time, but we didn't hear it. This is a very powerful point, actually, and it often takes us the time to hear it. Because we think of it, believe, and you're going to see, I'm not going to catch you up or anything, but people say, you have to believe in this, you believe in that, do you believe in reincarnation, do you have to believe in karma? Belief is not the issue. You don't say that when you talk math. If you go to a talk by Einstein and you don't even know 1 + 1 is 2 yet, you don't say, please sir, am I supposed to believe you? No, he says, don't believe me, here's my homework. You do the same thing, you'll get it. Takes you a few years. Buddha's the same. The same. And as the Dalai Lama says, if you do go through this process, step by step, and you get to a point where you prove he's wrong, then the Buddha's very delighted and he's the first person to be happy. Thank you very much. And you then, naturally, the real point the Dalai Lama said is then you must reject him. Of course, if he's wrong, you must reject him. Why would you keep believing something that's wrong? What absurd nonsense. So you've got to engage in it. Put your mind into it. And it's one tiny incremental baby step at a time, clearly. Because if you do hear, and we're going through the weekend, if you really start to hear the qualities of a person who has accomplished Sangye, Buddha, rid of all the rubbish and perfected all the goodness, it blows our mind. It's like science fiction. That's when it sounds like religion, like impossible, in the sky somewhere. So, okay. So then what essentially Buddha is saying, that these neuroses within us, he's found from his own direct experience and his own mind, doing this incredible inner work, coming from this amazing Indian tradition where they studied this, where they created this technique called single point of concentration, samadhi, that gets you to get to this really subtle level of your own mind that we don't even posit as existing in our culture. It's non-existent as far as we're concerned. That's why we think it's just mystical and religious. The level of, in the weekend I'll read from Lama Yeshe's book a little bit, it's very inspiring. Some of the qualities that we'd have if we had developed certain qualities in this single point of concentration, this samadhi, that's available to anybody who wants to work hard. It's available right there. The techniques are there. They're living extant techniques and and certainly in concentration and meditation, that's been going back 3,000-4,000 years. A living, real extant technique. Not something made up by somebody. And all the techniques are there, all the explanations are there to do it. And that's just to access a subtle level of your mind, in order to do the real work of unpacking and unraveling the contents to accomplish this goal, long term. Don't hold your breath. So the bottom line is, if it is possible, as Buddha is saying, the end result of all this work, that's where you graduate, if you like, as a Buddha, rid of all the rubbish and full of all the goodness. The words sound really delicious. I mean, no one likes anxiety, anger, depression, jealousy. Everyone likes joy, happiness, love and compassion. But again, like I said, it's so unbelievably bizarre to think of a person this way. We can't conceptualize, we can't imagine a person like this. It's hard for us to believe people can be like this. We know there are always exceptions on the planet where they seem to be most unusual people who had very suffering lives, who show extraordinary qualities. And we just kind of go, they're just unusual. We don't go, wow, I'd like to be like him. Please give me your methods, We just go, put them up on a pedestal, don't we? Oh yeah, that's unusual. They're not normal like us, We think that way. It's kind of insulting. If they are that way, my goodness, well, don't we want to be like it? Please show me your methods, So, okay, Buddha's deal is, if that's the end result, then again, why should we get rid of anxiety, ego, panic, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem, and any other words you'd like? Because they're horrible and they cause you suffering. Pretty straightforward. And the other stuff cause you happiness. Pretty straightforward. So that implies if all this stuff is in our mind, you know, we better know what Buddha means by the mind. And then we have to learn techniques that enable us to distinguish this stuff. So whether, and again, like I said in the week, you know, earlier in the week, we can go into what the mind is. It's kind of for the Buddha, and it's not the same as how we think. But even if we didn't go into that, like I said, I don't care if you think your mind's in your brain or your toenail. I don't care. It really doesn't. We don't need to even know that to know what anxiety feels like, to know what anger feels like, to know what love and kindness feel like. We get that. That's the point. And you don't need to study your brain to know that. If you do know your brain, when you say love, you might know which bit what. That's fine. But you don't need to know that. We know we can know the feelings. So that what I'm getting at is, then we can prove pretty quickly, we can agree with Buddha pretty quickly, that anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem and anxiety are horrible, are painful. So then what the Buddha is saying is this stuff is the source of our suffering. This stuff is the source of our pain and our suffering. And it's also the source of why we harm others. Check the world. People don't kill each other because they love them. Don't love them. Don't steal because they're being generous. Don't punch because not everyone's doing kung fu when you punch. So it's fairly evident, you know, anger, depression, anxiety, panic, all the rest are what cause you to be miserable to other people. It's sort of half a brain is enough to know that one. So the Buddha's deal is, then, if given that those unhappy states of mind are the source of why we do unhappy things to other people, then the very first level of practice is to at least control your body and speech. So, you know, as we know very well, the Tibetan packaging, as we know if you've been studying here, there's this term that they refer to as a Lamrim. Path, gradual. A gradual path. Well, a more modern phrase for a gradual path is a very nice medieval phrase. Tsongkhapa created it. It's a course. A course is a gradual path, isn't it? We don't think of it like that. But you say a course, we go, oh, I get that. I'm doing a gradual path in mathematics. You are, in fact. You're doing a gradual path in music. You are, in fact, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and then you graduate. It's very real, but we don't use that phrase. It's not our course, it's not our style. We would say it's a course. We get it. Well, the Lamrim is a course, and you graduate as a Buddha. Of course, Buddha says it takes you many lifetimes. It's a long-term course, okay? Unless you're very bright and you came into this life very advanced, you could do it in one lifetime, but most unusual. So then, just like any courses, we know, variations in different countries. You've got junior school, you've got high school, you have university, and you have postgraduate. For me, that's a great way of presenting what the Tibetans would refer to as, we know, the teachings of the lowest scope, the teachings of the middle scope, the teachings of the great scope. There's logic to those phrases, but we just don't use them. I'm happy to honour the lineage, you know, respectfully, and as Lama Zopa, respecting the lineage, would say exactly correctly that the first level of teachings are the teachings and the teachings in practice are suitable to the disciple of the least capability. Well, I'd rather call junior school, because we get it. Right there, we understand it. Immediately we get it, because it's our phrase. So it's a perfect way of packaging the whole course, this long-term package, you know. Junior school. So junior school level. So if the mind is the problem, Buddha's saying all the neuroses are the problem, the source of our suffering and the cause of why we harm others. So, and he's found methods to get rid of them. Thank goodness, it's the end of suffering, and it's suffering and its causes. So that you really begin to do in high school. You begin that one in high school. He says we're so programmed with this stuff. He says we come programmed with this stuff from the first second of conception, from having done before. Because his view of the mind, just to state it here for the record, we all know if we've been here before, the mind for the Buddha, it's mind or consciousness, number one. Number two, which we've already implied, it's got these far more subtle levels of cognition that we don't posit in modern psychology, certainly not in neuroscience. By definition, neuroscience is the brain, you know. These far more subtle levels that we do not access. We've never heard of them. But that's Buddha's expertise and these Hindus before him. So we've got these far more subtle levels of consciousness that do not depend upon the body or the brain for their functioning. That's the part that's weird for us, of course. So we have to posit that possibility. Because he says mind is not the brain. Mind is not physical. That's crucial. He doesn't use the word soul or spirit. He says that mind or consciousness is not physical. The brain functions, there's no doubt. So my way of putting it fairly simply would be the brain is the physical indicator of what goes on in the mind. Mind is not physical. Known synonymously with the word consciousness. Goes to far more subtle levels. And crucially, has this extraordinary potential to be free of all the rubbish and full of all the goodness. Quite radical. But the other crucial point, huge for the Buddha, which is completely part of that tradition that was there for thousands of years, which is new for us, both as materialists and as Christians and Jews. That consciousness did not begin, your mind did not begin in your mother's womb. It did not, and so you're not the handiwork of your mummy and daddy, and you're not the handiwork of a creator. That's a crucial difference in Buddhism, because Buddha doesn't assert a creator. He's not being rude. His own experiential findings would say, and he would suggest philosophically it's a mistake. He's not being rude. That's a shocking thing to say if you're talking to people who are believing in God. So if you have faith in a creator, don't be insulted by this. This is Buddha's philosophical finding, his own direct experiential finding. He uses the word superior being, no problem. But he says everybody can become one. That's the difference. Every one of us has the potential to become a perfect consciousness that pervades the universe, that sees reality as it is, that sees the minds of all beings, that has infinite compassion and infinite wisdom. That's the Buddha's view. Every one of us has that potential. The Christian teachers would say there's just one of those, and that's called God. Massive, that's where the massive difference is. So the difference in the mind, if it didn't come from mummy and daddy, and we're not in the handiwork of mummy and daddy give us a body, no problem. They give us a body and a brain, but not our love, not our compassion, not our kindness, not our psychosis, not our being good at football, not our being good at music, because they're tendencies of your consciousness. They're qualities of your mind. And for the Buddha, your mind is totally personal. Everything in your mind, baby, is what you put there. And that's the view of karma, which we're going to get to. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say for the Buddha stays programmed in our consciousness. Every single thing. Nothing goes astray. So, consciousness then did not begin in our mother's womb. We are not the handiwork of mummy and daddy, except they give us a body, they're very kind. We are not the handiwork of a superior being. There's no job like that as far as the Buddha is concerned. Because we create ourselves, the Buddha's view. Our minds did not begin then. They came from before and before and before and before and before and before, and will continue on and on and on. This is the nuttiest idea we've ever heard. That your consciousness is beginningless and endless. It takes us a while to get our head around that concept. But we're just presenting the Buddha's findings here. That's up to us to take them as our working hypothesis and to work with them. Step by baby step, you know. One step at a time. Don't have to panic. So given that our mind is the source of happiness and the source of suffering, and this is the view of the Buddha about the entire universe, everything literally is a creation of the mind. And that is not evident initially, without exception. We've got to look into that in more depth to really get what he's saying about it. Given that the mind, but given that our mind drives everything, and that we do have body and we do have speech, and we can see it's pretty evident that our body and our speech are the parts of us that do the harm and that do the good. Well, initially we're dealing with the harm. Good comes later. We've got to harness the crazy harming parts of us first, you know. So junior school, entry level, grade 1 junior school, Buddha's exhorts us just like Jesus, just like your grandma. Don't harm others. Specifically, don't kill any sentient being. Why not, Buddha? Well, honey, they don't like it. It hurts them. That's his logic. It's a natural law. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't badmouth. Don't jump on the wrong partner. 7 little baby things. There are 3 more that are about the beginning of working on your mind, and we'll go into that. But initially, it's control your body, control your speech. And I like to think of our body and speech as the servants of our mind, and that's a perfect way to put it. And these servants are out of control. Even if we don't go around killing, lying and stealing and, you know, harming too many people, look at our own pathetic old habits. We can't control eating too much cake. We don't have much discipline. You know, we're lazy. We mean well, but after 3 days of trying to meditate, we can't be bothered. You go to yoga 3 times in a row and you can't be bothered. Always fun. I mean, we're addicted to our comfort zones, you know, and our body and speech just run the show. And because we're not conscious of what's happening in our mind, then our body and speech seem to have another energy of their own. They seem to do what they want, you know. You're saying, I don't want any more cake, and your mouth's putting in the, oh, what's happening here, you know? Because the habits are so deep. So because the habits are so primordial, the Buddha says, coming from before, we came fully programmed, not with mummies and daddies and grandpas and the monkeys' tendencies, which is the materialist model, not coming from God, but from our own selves. We bring our own stuff with us. We come into this life fully programmed with our own tendencies, just some of them, from the first second of conception. And we'll go into all this in the weekend, how it works, you know, how we die, how we continue, etc., etc. So given that we come into this life, and we all know that since we're tiny children, we can recognize the habits since we're born. We have habits to be patient, habit to get angry, habit to get depressed, habit to be anxious. We can see ourselves. We can see ourselves as we're tiny. We kind of grown into this personality of ours, you know. So the very first level of practice is very humble. Just watch your body and watch your speech. Control your behavior. I mean, it sounds so simple. It sounds embarrassing. But we don't pay much attention to this in our culture. We don't think it matters. We say, I can say what I like. We say that. I can say what I like. Not even to mention, I can think what I like. Well, yes, Buddha says you can. But guess what, babies? Everything you think and do and say has consequences. First and foremost, to us. This is a profound point, and I tell you, we could happily talk the whole weekend just on that point, which is the basis of karma, the law of karma. So the law of karma for the Buddha, his observation, coming from the Hindus, is that every millisecond of what we think and feel and do and say, every millisecond, sows seeds in our mind. That's the way that the Buddhists talk, sows seeds in the mind. And we know that a seed, if left there, will manifest at some point as a fruit. So that's the Buddha's deal. There's nothing we think and do and say that goes astray. Sow seeds in our mind that will ripen in the future as our experiences. And we'll go into details about this. Necessarily, this is the principle in the Buddhist view, which is why the Buddhist view would say the creator idea isn't the issue. He would say we don't need creating, because we create ourselves every millisecond, from life after life after life. We sow the seeds and we experience the fruits. And then every second we're sowing more seeds and sow more fruits and sow more seeds and get more fruits and so on and so forth. And this is where we frame the whole of this law very easily in terms of happiness and suffering. It covers it. And we'll go into this in more depth. So if that's true, that every millisecond of what I think and do and say, and one step forward now, every millisecond of what I think and do and say that's driven by a negative state of mind, anxiety, anger, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem, you name it, will necessarily sow seeds in the future that will ripen as my suffering to one degree or another. Because they're neurotic, they're ego-based, they're I-based, they're deeply suffering, and they're deeply distorted states of mind. We're going to go all in the detail about this. Go into the detail of Buddhist psychology, which is very fascinating, describing these states of mind in great depth, as we've been talking throughout the week. And then every millisecond of what we think and do and say that's driven by a virtuous or positive state of mind, love, forgiveness, kindness, generosity, etc., will necessarily ripen as my happiness. So it's not punishment, it is not reward. There is no concept like that, because there is no punisher and there's no rewarder. Punishment and reward imply a person who runs the show, a person who judges and punishes and rewards. There is no concept like that in Buddhism. But we hear it like that because we're so used to the view of whether it's your mother, the father, the police, or the judge, or God. It's the same principle. It's the same philosophical position. This dualistic idea that there's someone up there who punishes and rewards. It's very dualistic for the Buddha. Not like that, he says. It's quite a subtle point. We do it to ourselves, he says. We are the creators. As His Holiness Dalai Lama said, karma's like self-creation. It's a really shocking concept, because look at how we live our lives. We believe there are people out there who cause our happiness, and we believe that people out there and the things out there and the events out here cause our suffering. We never think we are the cause, and that's what Buddha is saying. And this is the one that takes us the longest of times to start to become. It's accountability, the deepest kind of accountability you can imagine. where we really do experience the fruits of what we caused, and we really are in charge of creating new causes to ensure that we don't have any more suffering and that we do have more happiness, that we are the boss. And I say that constantly. It's a powerful concept. That's what the Buddha's saying, not in those words. He didn't talk like that back then. But that's the essential implication of the Buddhist philosophical view of karma, and the mind. And they go intimately together. Because the law of karma is this law. No one made it up. He didn't create it. It's a natural law. He's observed it. That's a shocking thing too. We know you can observe botany, you can observe numbers, you can observe engineering, and people have created. This is a crucial point again about natural law. You hear this. The person who first came up with botany, they didn't think about it. They didn't create botany. The world was already there. Things were already growing, but they observed the growing things and articulated what they observed. That's natural law. That's science. That's what Buddha's done about the human mind. Well, the minds of all beings, actually. It's very shocking for us. We can't get that almost. It's too shocking to hear. But that's exactly the point. It's natural law. Karma is so botany is the law that gardens run within, if you like. The law of the concept of botany describe gardens. Gardens don't need to know about it. They're going to grow happily according to the laws of the universe. They don't need to know them. They just does it. We know that. Numbers, Engineering, architecture. You think of any natural we think about. Someone has observed it with their brilliant mind and then articulated it. It's exactly what Einstein did. It's what any scientist does. And that's exactly, and I don't mean it to be in a cliche in any way, that's what Buddha did with his own mind. And he presents it. And he says, this is my findings. Over to you, baby. He's not forcing us. Up to you to decide if you want to go into this and prove it for yourself. Just like Einstein. Exactly the same, not a fraction of difference. The only difference is that his view of the mind is radically different. His view of the mind is that it can go to these more subtle levels, because without that, this is not possible, clearly. Because you can't observe karma with the intellect. You can know the theories of it. So the Buddha's view of what's possible to cognize is by definition more subtle, because his view of the mind is more subtle. So we've got to get used to that idea too. And in the beginning, it's not catch-22. In the beginning, if you first begin to study acupuncture, if you first begin to study numbers, you don't know if it's true. You've never heard of numbers before, so what are you going to do? You've got to start to believe somebody. You've got to start to trust somebody. You've got to have confidence in somebody who's already done numbers. But you've got to check up before, and this is what Buddha says all the time. Don't just check up any old Joe. You check up on their reputation. You check up that they know what they're talking about. You have to have some confidence. The person treating you acupuncture is some wacko person who made it up. Because you can't prove it intellectually because you don't know it. Even, I always use the example, when I first learned to make a cake, from my mummy actually. I was 25, I was a hippie in London in 1960-something or other. Whatever it was, maybe 70-something, I can't remember now. And that was the first time in my life the thought arose in my mind, I'd like to make a cake. I was a hippie and I remember I wanted to make a carrot cake. I was 25, that means it was 1969. Okay, 1969, I was 25. And it was a revelation. I thought, I've never wanted to make a cake in my whole life, ever. It was the first time. So then I was going home to Melbourne anyway. I didn't go especially to ask my mum. And I thought, I'll ask my mum. Why? And why did I do that? I'd done my market research. I'd tasted her cakes. You get my point? I'm serious. This is the point. And that's how they talk about how you check somebody. I'd tasted her students' cakes. My sisters. Her peers said she was a good cake maker. So what else can you do if you want to go to a yoga center, an acupuncturist? That's exactly what you check. You check their reputation, you check the people who've gone there, you check the peers. What else can you do? You don't have experiential knowledge. You can't have experiential knowledge. Okay, sometimes you can risk it. Like yesterday, I looked up for a Thai massage therapist. And I found this place called, what was it called? Tia? Sukha. And I saw it and I thought they looked really professional. I liked the management. They've got people 7 days a week. I thought they're on the case. And then I booked in and I got Tia. Right there. I'm not trying to embarrass her. And she was one of the best therapists I've had. So just karma takes care. So karma takes care. I think sometimes you're lucky, you know. I didn't do any checking, but I got to you. So you can cross your fingers sometimes. But generally speaking, it's not the cool way to go. No, I did some checking. I did some checking, and I was confident. So that's the thing with my mum. I had done exactly that. I promise. So in fact, I went home to Melbourne, and this is what's so fascinating. I was ready. My mind, and this is the first point. My mind was ready. I wanted it, you know. She knew automatically from the time I was little, because you could see my proud nature, there was no benefit in making me learn to make a cake. I never asked, I never showed interest, so she didn't push me. She must have been so happy. There I was, 25, she waited 23 years for me to ask, you know. Finally I asked. But the point is this, my mind was ready, and I'd done my due diligence, and I said, Mummy, please show me how to make a cake. I called her Mummy. I know it sounds funny, but Mummy, not even Mommy. Mummy, we say in Australia. And this is what's interesting. As Lama Yesi said, Buddha's dead. So that's why you need a teacher, a human person in a human form who's embodying Buddha's qualities. And it's then that the Four Noble Truths become real for you. And that's when cakes became real for me for the first time. From the human mind. And she was, the Tibetan, the lovely phrase, she was a knowledge holder. Rigsin in Tibetan, a knowledge holder. She had the knowledge in her mind. And I asked her, and I remember that day. It's like in my mind. You know the picture in your mind? I'll never lose it. It's in the memory, and I'll never lose it. The moment she told me how to make a cake. And the thing is, I didn't, you know, imagine how dumb I had been if I'd checked up, done my research, and then she said, well, darling, get 2 eggs and beat them. What do you mean 2? Why not 6? No, I had to trust her. I didn't have any other method, but I had some certainty first, inferential certainty. So then I asked her, she showed me, and it was in fact an apple and walnut cake, and I made a very good cake because it all went in. I heard her, I did what she said. And then it became real for me. And I haven't made a cake in 25, 30 years, I bet you. And I bet if I could make one, it's in my mind, you know, I can remember it. So checking on the Buddha in this same way, it's that we've got to start somewhere. You've got to check and listen, analyse, check it up, read the books, think about it, you know. Don't just jump in. And that's the trouble with spiritual teachings. Because we think it's all airy-fairy, intricate, all airy-fairy mystical stuff. Because we think it's airy-fairy and mystical and can't be proved, then we think I'm allowed to think what I like. In fact, I would suggest with my, you know, who do I think I am, but the worst mistake since Buddhism's come to the West, we're just watering it down because we don't like what we read. Oh, I don't like that. I think we'll throw that bit out. And then we write our own books, our own analysis. You've been to a meditation course, you had a good feeling, you write a book about it. And we think we're allowed to. We say we're allowed to. I mean, it's extremely insulting. It's extremely arrogant. It's unbelievable. But we think it's okay because it's religion, because you can't prove anything anyway. I mean, it's beyond shocking, you know. So, first level of practice, junior school, entry level, grade 1. Given that the delusions, as the Buddha would call these neuroses, are driving our body and speech, our behavior, which is why we harm others, at the very least, the deepest level, then at least refrain, first level, at least refrain from using your body and speech to harm others. At least that. They're not the only things that are called negative actions. The Buddha would say anything that we think or do or say that's driven by a neurosis is in itself a negative action. It would sow seeds and cause me future suffering. But here the grossest, heaviest level is when you harm others. At least refrain from those, at least. Buddha's got detailed descriptions, and we'll talk in the weekend about the consequences of these actions karmically in the future. We're just talking principles here. Then when it's logical, once you've begun to harness your own energy, and that takes time to get disciplined behaviour, because Buddha said, you know, like I say, we say, I can do what I like. We can, but the Buddha's view is that every millisecond of what I think and do and say programs me, first and foremost, will bring consequences to me. Forget even the fact that so the real point that Buddha's here, at this first point, killing is called a negative action for the Buddha as a natural law because it harms others. But the reason at the beginning he exhorts us not to do it, he says, guess what, people? It'll harm you. It programs you in the tendency, it programs you in the habit to keep doing it, it'll program you eventually to have the experience of that and all other kind of consequences, which we'll talk about in the weekend. So the very first level of karma is out of kindness to yourself, out of compassion for yourself, out of the wish to not suffer yourself. This is the one we skip over. We don't get this one at all. We don't get this one, you know. But if we can't, like we talked last night about compassion, we can't skip over this one. We can't until we know our own minds deeply, until we have got in touch with our own fears and depression and anxiety with humility and compassion for ourselves, and see how it breaks our hearts and how that stuff is what causes us to harm others. Until we come in touch with that, we can't really begin to have compassion for others. It's just not possible. Because everybody's, you know, when you get compassion wing, that's university level. Where you see we're all in the same boat, all driven by the same craziness. And your heart can then easily reach out to others because you realize we're all programmed in the same way. Variations on a theme, you know, different recipes of the same stuff. So the first level is such a powerful level of practice. You harness your body and speech energy, not because someone says, which is the usual view, we do it. No, it's for your own sake. It's so evident, it's so obvious. But that takes time to think about. And already you become a more sublime person because you're controlling your body and speech. It's already incredible. Then you're qualified now to go to high school and start to get to the root of the problem with your mind. You learn to concentrate. You can do that sooner, but you really now begin to, as Lama Yeshe puts it, to be your own therapist. You unpack and unravel your own mind. And this is this is where you actually become a Buddhist. This is where you actually engage in the actually central job of being a Buddhist, to unpack and unravel and deconstruct and reconstruct your own mind we can mold our mind into any shape we like, as Lama Zopa says. And we're trying to mold our mind into the mind of a blissful being, our potential, our natural potential, the natural potential of every being, you know. Less the delusions and grow the goodness. That's it. So the second is where we really can do the job. Seriously. Then you get to the compassion wing. That's the wisdom wing. Those junior school and high school is the wisdom wing, where the nuts and bolts of Buddha's teachings about karma and the mind. These are vast, dealt with in great depth in the literature, you know. And to the degree that we want to engage in it is up to us. The Buddhist model of the mind is massive. It's fascinating, I tell you. And the view about karma is fascinating. It's all there in the literature, you know. That's the wisdom wing. And you are the main beneficiary of this. This is mainly to harness our crazy body, speech and mind, to lessen our own suffering first. And from this we become a stable, amazing, marvelous, content, fulfilled person. Just that alone. Now we can begin to see everybody's in the same boat, and we can afford now to reach out to want to even benefit others. You don't wait till you've perfected these things. You can do them all simultaneously, but according to your capacity. Then the compassion wing comes, and that's massive, unbelievable, powerful, the bodhisattva path. Yeah. So we touched on the compassion wing a bit yesterday. So you continue doing this. On the compassion wing, it's the same. You continue to work on your mind. But in the initial stages, you're mainly learning to refrain from doing ridiculous things to harm others because you're sick of suffering. It's a powerful point to not just gloss over. We've got to be sick of suffering. So for this reason, we harness our body and speech. We stop harming others. So, of course, others will get the benefit. As Lama Zopa says, all the rats and roaches will have a party because we leave them in peace. But the main beneficiary is oneself, and that's powerful meaning. Then we can begin to have compassion, and now we can reach out and continue to work on our mind. That never changes all the way to Buddhahood. But here, now the main emphasis is in terms of how to continue to break down the barriers that have now, the neuroses, to continue to lessen the neuroses, because they are the ones that create the barrier between self and other. They're the ones that separate us from others. So this is, again, more radical practices to try and break down ego's views in order to get closer and closer and more powerfully develop more powerful love, more empathy, more compassion, and so on and so forth. It's all laid out, it's all structured, you know, based on the different meditations as we go along. The two wings of the bird. And then the final stages of the compassion wing are where we, you know, once we've achieved this powerful state of mind that I think always the Tibetan word still seems, the Sanskrit word actually, still seems to be the best one because the English translation makes it so boring. But it's bodhicitta. it's this powerful aspiration based upon incredible levels of love and compassion. It's very progressive, and it culminates in this extraordinary state of mind called bodhicitta, which is not itself compassion, but is the result of extraordinary compassion. So like we talked last night, so what is love and what is compassion? These are the essence of the positive qualities. Love is defined as just simply the thought, may you be happy. It's the delight in others' happiness. It's the wishing that others be happy. And as you grow that, it becomes more affectionate, more marvelous, and then it becomes the genuine, powerful wish, it's my job to make you happy. Not in the neurotic way we have now, based on our attachment and our neediness. That's just manipulation. But genuine, brave attitude. My job is to help others. This is powerful. But as Dalai Lama always says, compassion is not enough. You can only go so far in the compassion wing unless you've done the wisdom wing, the first stages of practice, where you become this marvelous, contained, self-confident, fulfilled person yourself by lessening your own neuroses and harnessing your crazy energy. Then you're capable of continuing to even grow more on the compassion wing, because now you've got less neuroses, less neediness, less ridiculousness, so you can see others more clearly. Because it's our attachment and anger and fears and anxiety that prevent us from seeing other people. We can't see past our own noses if we can't put ourselves together. So then we grow this love and compassion hugely, based, like we said last night, on this equanimity quality, which we'll go into in the weekend again. So then compassion is the flip side of love, the way they describe it. It's it's when you see suffering, you have empathy. May others not suffer. And then you even have the powerful attitude they call great compassion. It's what can I do to help? This is the brave attitude. They call it the brave attitude. And then that culminates in this powerful aspiration, which is a higher development of realizations, where it's become where it's spontaneous, that you will never give up working on yourself until you become a Buddha to benefit sentient beings. It's a powerful level of realization when you've made this paradigm shift, gone beyond the neurotic eye, beyond your own neediness, because you're so advanced, and you've got this profound attitude that causes you to go from life to life, never giving up, perfecting your mind, becoming a Buddha, so that you can be of perfect benefit to others. It's like that, roughly. So in the final stages of it, once you've done that, then you go to the final stages of the Bodhisattva path, like the final stages of university level, where you then practice, you then perfect these different qualities of the Bodhisattva. And this is where you perfect wisdom. You perfect, the wisdom wing is where you really calm your mind down, steady your mind. You get some wisdom, of course. But where you perfect that wisdom, where you go to the deepest level of wisdom and you learn to cut the root completely of all the neuroses. And this is where you realize emptiness, where you really cut the dualistic view altogether. That's the most advanced level of Buddha's teachings, of the wisdom level. And that's where they're really expressed. And we'll go into those in detail. And that's taught at the final stages of the Bodhisattva path, where you cultivate this extraordinary level of wisdom. And that, combined with the compassion, is what then causes you to become a Buddha. But before that, you then can enter into postgraduate, and that's the Vajrayana. That's Tantra, or Vajrayana, which is coming again from the Hindus, from the Indians. And that's the most advanced level of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology. And we'll discuss that briefly tomorrow as well. That was meant to take me 90 minutes, and it didn't. I'm sorry, it took me an hour again. I talk too fast, what to do. So you're going to have to ask me some questions now. That's a tiny summary. We're going to go unpacking all these pieces tomorrow, the weekend. Each of these we'll go through: junior school, high school, university, postgraduate. So ask me some questions, please. Ask me some questions. Yeah. Hi.
This has been very beneficial, thank you.
What, precious one?
This has been very beneficial, thank you.
Well, I'm happy, good.
I practice maybe 7 or 8 different religions, and I mostly do Hinduism.
Yes, good.
Buddhism included.
Cool.
But I really, the Christian part of me wants to be very challenging about
I can't quite hear you, darling. Just keep it there. Keep it, treat it like an ice cream. That's it. And keep it close to your mouth. No, just keep it close to your mouth.
Okay.
That's it, that's better. Go. So ask me the question.
It's the God thing. It's the idea that the Tibetan Buddhists have no equivalent.
No,
of
Buddhism
God.
has no equivalent. Buddhism. Buddha is not in Tibetan. Buddha, right back 2,500 years ago, he diverged from the Hindu tradition and then in his own part. So Buddha does not have a view of creator. Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, there's the Tara.
Oh yeah, but it's not creators though.
Yeah.
They're just archetypes, if you like. They're just
that's
a particular aspect of what we can become.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe. Can you hand me a Tibetan concept that would include the notion that God is everything, God is within, harmony, synchronicity, miracles?
Well, no, I mean those words you're using
is that like the
no,
Tathagata?
they're not words we would use in Buddhism or Tibetan otherwise, either way, Tibetan or not. But I can hear those phrases you're saying, and I could say easily that the concept of Buddha is where you're completely one, there's no longer any dualism, you have infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, and everything, and you are oneness with everything. So that you could argue that's like that. But each one of us has to find. I'd suggest there's so much commonality, and as you're pointing out very nicely, because you practice many paths, it's true. But my feeling is once we start to go really deeply, you've got to choose one way, and then when you've chosen that one, I think then it leads you into all the others. So you keep moving, and you sound like you're doing beautifully on your path.
Well, I get a lot out of my Buddhist practice.
I'm very happy about that.
But I get sort of stuck on a deserted island. It
Well, then you
feels
shouldn't do
everything
it then.
feels very stark, very scarce,
Well, then
and
don't
I have
go
to turn
there.
away from it.
Well, then don't go there, darling.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Use what works best for you. Yeah. You don't need to do them all. Choose the one that you like best. What suits your mind best, do you think?
Thank you. Thank you. I think you answered my question.
All right, I'm very happy.
I was hoping there was a word for it.
No.
Like
Well, you could
similar
argue very
concept.
simply Buddha, God. I mean, very loosely, they're not the same meaning. They're not. But just, I don't know what to say to you. I don't want to argue philosophically with you and say they're all different. I don't want to say that, so I'll find the union way of saying it and say the word Buddha will do. Good enough. It's up to you to think if you like that or not.
I would call it maybe just good luck.
I wouldn't call it that.
You said it's bodhicitta. Is that?
No, bodhicitta is infinite kind of powerful wish to benefit others. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good, sweetheart. What may I know your name?
Henton.
Thank you, Hinton. Very kind.
Thank you,
so
Robina.
much. Who else would like to ask me a question? Nobody? Somebody? Yes, darling.
Thank you so much. This
Yes.
is wonderful to
Good,
hear
good,
you.
good.
Can you explain non-dualism for
Yeah, well,
my
that's-
simple mind?
I know, everyone keeps asking me all week, and I keep promising to do it at the weekend. So let's just do it briefly here, okay? All that we've discussed so far leads us inexorably to that. It mightn't be evident to us, but everything is priming our mind ready to get us to that one. And it leads to that one. So basically the Buddha's saying that deep in our bones, the deepest, most primordial misconception that's there, and that's one term he would use to refer to all the neurotic states of mind, they're all deep, instinctive misconceptions, that many of which seem to have an emotional component as well, and they're all the voices of this neurotics, speaking loosely, he's saying this deepest mistake in us is that we really believe deep in there somewhere there is a definite, solid, isolated, concrete, independent me. Basically, he says it's primordially deep. The belief in that is just primordial and ancient. And he says it's a mistake. There isn't. No, he's not saying there isn't a me. He's saying there isn't a concrete, independent, ridiculous, fear-based, neurotic, self-piteous, absurd, bereft, lonely, sad me. And that's the irony of ego. And it's known colloquially, the mistake that causes us to cling to that is called ego grasping. And it's the primordial mistake. And when that, or to see things as non-dualistic, to see things as dualistic. So a simple way of saying that is this. And it sounds very abstract to us, okay? So here we are in this room, and there's many individual people. We all agree with that, don't we? And that's the Buddha's view, that we've got these individual rivers of mental moments, individual consciousnesses programmed second by our own actions. And we're all experiencing the fruits of our own past, and we keep creating the causes for our own future, right? So that'll happen for eternity until we start cutting the delusions, starting in junior school and stop harming others, then go to high school and get to the grosser level of the delusions, the voices of this ego grasping, attachment that exaggerates the deliciousness of things that causes us to cling to them, the aversion that causes us to push away the other things and all the other pathetic, ridiculous delusions that we've got. They're all the voices of the root delusion. So we've got to harness those crazy ones first. And then as we progress into bodhicitta, and then we can progress to the subtlest level of wisdom, where we now can really get to the root of the problem and cut even the belief in a separate me, as abstract as that sounds. So the result of that would be you'd become a Buddha. When you've got the two wings perfected, the perfection of wisdom is when you've cut the dualistic eye, and the perfection of compassion is where you have infinite compassion for others. So the combination of these would be such that you would have your consciousness now no longer encumbered by any delusions, and certainly not by dualism. It's the final one to go. Your consciousness now no longer imprinted with any rubbish, completely purified. You'd have infinite compassion such that it's as if you are oneness with every living being, without exception. You would have a mind that's pervading the universe, that has infinite wisdom and infinite power and infinite compassion. And it's as if you're oneness with all beings. So there's no longer for you, the crucial piece is there's no longer any sense of a separate self. And you're infinitely powerful, infinitely compassionate, infinitely wise. And you will continue to take lifetime after life after life after life, bopping around, taking bodies here and there to benefit sentient beings as long as the sentient beings are suffering. That's the end result of you achieving non-dualism. Did you hear me?
Yes. So does that mean experiencing emptiness directly, the same thing?
Yeah, of course, exactly. And that's the first major crucial turning point. Controlling your body and speech with the law of karma, because dependent karma is a powerful example of dependent arising, which is lessening ego grasping already when you realize that you're in charge of your own reality. And then you get to compassion. So you're already honing the wisdom wing and honing the compassion wing, and you perfect that when you have bodhicitta, and then you get the final wisdom of cutting the root delusion. That's what prevents us. That's the final one to go, and that's the sense of a separate I. And your first moment of realizing that is the first moment of realizing emptiness. From that second, you've made this paradigm shift that you now climb out of samsara into your nirvana. You haven't got there yet. You've got more to go, but you can't go back after that. That's the crucial turning point. And then you finally rid the mind of all the rubbish, even the fraction of a moment of all the rubbish, and then it's gone completely. Then you've perfected the two wings, and you're a Buddha. And we'll go into details tomorrow. Okay? And it's very interesting. This is a very interesting point. Hang on a tick. A few years ago, I had to give a talk at the University of Melbourne in Australia. And it was the Catholic University. The Catholic University in Melbourne. And I didn't know until the moment I walked in what I'd talk about. I couldn't think of a topic. I had 20 minutes, So I opened the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and I looked up the definition of God. And it said, infinite power, infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, and infinite power. Well, they are the three qualities of a Buddha. So that I would suggest, without trying to be rude to anybody, that the Buddhist, the concept of Jesus, of God, is that, but there's one of them, and he creates everything. But the concept in Buddhism is that everybody has the potential to become that, and you don't need creating, we create ourselves. Speaking simply. So my topic was the similarity between the definition of God and Buddha. I don't know if the Catholics liked it or not, but that was my topic. So it's my feeling is over the centuries, I think about this and I say this a lot, I find it very powerful. Over the centuries in human cultures, everywhere you go, unbelievable what humans do. I have such respect, but we're so rude and arrogant in our views, But I mean, the number of humans in all, I think of Australian Aboriginals, 40,000 years they were left alone in their own amazing little place. Until the white people came, of course. The Christians, the good old Christians came along, I'm sorry to say. and I mean, made a mess of everything. But their view that developed in those 40,000 years, untouched by other views, is so abstract. You try to understand their view of dream time. I have no idea what they're talking about. It's so abstract. It's so fascinating. Do you understand? So humans develop views everywhere. Scientists think they're the only ones who ever think about things, and everyone else is an idiot. I mean, we're beyond arrogant in our culture. It's almost so embarrassing to even think about it. The hubris. That we're the only ones who know anything, I mean, it's so unbelievably, it's almost embarrassing to say it. But I admire any scientist, any Christian, any Muslim, any Southern Baptist, any Australian Aboriginal, any American Indian, anybody. Human beings are amazing, and they've all come up with different views, and my sense is they've observed many similar things. But they come up with different interpretations. So I think it's just fine. And it's our job. Either you come up with your own, I don't care, it's your job. But we've been asking these questions for millions of thousands of years. I think it's amazing. So it's up to us to search and check it out and take it seriously, Do you understand? Anyway, blah, blah. So what else? What's next? Next question. Yeah? Where are you? Okay, darling.
I have a question. Is it on? So you said we create ourselves.
Well, speaking simply, cliched, it's really
Yes.
true.
Okay,
Over a long period of time.
So what's our first moment? Is our first moment when we drop out of non-duality?
I understand. No.
duality?
It's very fascinating. This is all a question we always ask, because we seem to have a view that we did begin somewhere, don't we?
Right.
Well, that's the Buddha's point. You see, this is the point. Not the point. The materialists are still trying to find the first Big Bang, right? Aren't we? We're trying to find the first Big Bang, aren't we?
Right.
But even as the Dalai Lama said, with all his amazing conversations with scientists the last 30 years, and much of it's been published, it's fantastic, he says, Big Bang, not the problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. So then if the Christian and the Muslim and the Jewish view is that there is a beginning and it's called God, but if you're a naughty boy or girl at school, please miss, where did God come from? You're not supposed to, I'm not being rude here, but we're not supposed to ask that question. But it's a very logical question. So the Buddha says you can't have a first moment. His reason is this: everything in the universe exists within the law of cause and effect. This takes us time to hear, but I'll try and say it. Everything exists within the law of cause and effect. In general, I think we call that science, cause and effect. You learn the laws of botany and you're going to get a rose every damn time you put those causes together. We get that, we know that. So the point is this: in the sense of it's being a linear concept, this exists because of the previous thing. So check anything. This exists now, and what was its main cause? The previous moment of it. And what was that? That's the fruit of the previous one. The law of cause and effect in a linear sense, this result is the fruit of a previous cause. Do you agree with that? And that cause was the fruit of the previous cause, which is the result, and it goes back. And we want to go back to the first cause, don't we? We want a first cause, want a first moment. But if we have cause and effect, how can you have a thing that begins that didn't have a previous cause? Not circular. No, not circular. That's what we like to hear, like this circular. There's no circular. It's a linear concept. A rose is not circular. A rose is today coming from a seed in the past. And the seed today brings a rose in the future. It's a linear concept. Very simple. Don't make it kind of weird. 2019 comes from after 2018. Everything's linear. Nothing wrong with that. I don't know who made up the circular business in spiritual, but I don't know what it means, but there's no such thing as circular. I mean, you can talk about cycles of seasons and things, yes, but in terms of cause and effect, it's very linear. A cause necessarily comes before the effect. An effect necessarily comes after a cause. So if you go back and back, as weird and as wacky as it sounds, the Buddha has observed that you can't have a first moment. So consciousness is beginningless. And he says matter is beginningless also, and he calls matter is made of the 4 elements. That's fundamental in Buddhism. In science, we have 47,000 elements now, but that even used to how we thought back in the Middle Ages, But matter and minds are beginningless. That's the Buddha's view. Yes, please, go.
Okay, so can you say more about Tantra? I've heard it thrown around.
Of course, darling, of course. Yeah. It's postgraduate. It's the most esoteric level of Buddhist psychology and philosophy. So maybe I'll mention briefly here one. So the Buddha's view is if you want to find the main cause of our day-to-day suffering, it's the neurotic state of mind called attachment, which is the main voice of ego grasping. And we're going to go into this in the weekend. And it's primordial, and we've spoken about it every single day this week, and it's huge in Buddhism. And we'll go into it in detail in the weekend. So the main voice of ego grasping, the ego is I want, always wanting more, always needing more, never ending. Never mind all that. Attachment is called. So, given that attachment is our main problem, the first level of practice is control the servants of attachment and calm your body and speech down, so that you begin to harness that. Then you get to high school where you really start to work on your mind and really begin to get in touch with this attachment, which is the source of anger and all the other dramas. So you really harness your mind. So then, and then at the Bodhisattva path, you're more controlled, and by the time you get to Tantra, you're really controlled. So basically it's like this. So at the beginning stages, attachment, the only thing to do is leave the cake on the plate because you're so berserk. You just got to stuff 47 pieces in. So you don't feed attachment because it's too berserk. So you control yourself, you control your body and speech, and you don't go there. That's the best way to deal with attachment at the first level, junior school. By the time you get to high school, you know your mind already pretty well by now. You could even argue you can have a bit of cake without the mind going too berserk because you really know what attachment is and you're not in the thrall of it. By the time you get to the compassion wing, your compassion is so huge that overrides any attachment. Your genuine compassion, the wish to help others, is way more powerful, and you'll happily eat a piece of cake to make another person happy, but it won't affect you. Because your attachment is getting less and less and less, your compassion is growing more and more and more. You're with me. By the time you get to Tantra, you've got such wisdom, such power, such renunciation, such compassion. You're a stupendous person already. And now at that level, the most sophisticated level of Buddhist psychology is where you're able to utilize what is normally known as the poisons, attachment, anger, and all the neuroses. All the methods enable you to utilize those as grist for the mill to help you quickly get wisdom and quickly become a Buddha. That's the principle. We'll go into the details in the weekend. That's the idea. The most advanced level. Do you understand the essence of it? Good, darling. What else, people?
Hello.
Where are you?
I'm right here.
Yes, sweetheart.
I am working really, really hard to absorb a lot of these new concepts.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I have worked with the idea of karma.
Yes.
And yet in my own experience, I see similarities in my behavior to those of my parents or grandparents.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
And
yes.
yet the concept of karma suggests that I come into this world with
pre-programmed tendencies, yes, from your own past practice, yes.
And where does learning from your biological, your family,
I understand.
Impact karma,
Exactly.
or is it totally
No,
separate?
it's not. It's totally, it makes sense. You'll hear how I'll say it. It'll make sense. So basically like this. You know, my mummy was a classical musician. Okay? So the Buddha's view of why she's good at music is because she'd done it before. So she came into this world with those tendencies and she practiced music and she was accomplished. So then her little Bobsy popped up. That's me. Okay, her second daughter, and she observed when I was quite young that I was good at music too. She had that she could see I had a good tendency. So obviously, the materialist view is that I got those from my mummy, the genes, you know, and then she taught me music. Now the Buddha's view is my mummy was good at it because she was done it before, and I was good at it because I'd done it before, and then due to our collective karma, we came together, and then so like in other words, a bunch of fascists will have fascist babies most likely, because you know you tend not always, but you know. We go to where we go to where we're our family. So if you're a racist, you're going to find a racist parent, very likely. And then your mother increases it by teaching you. But we can also see every time in some families, like you can have a child. I mean, all of my siblings had some tendency to play music. We all had that. But also there can always be some who are tone deaf. So that's where the contradiction seems to come. In other words, you go to where you've got the similar tendencies, and you can even see it in your grandma and grandpa. And even the way our bodies' shapes are is the fruit of our karma. So you can argue that you and your grandma and your mother all created such similar actions, you've got the same kind of ear, the same kind of nose. That's the way to understand it. Let's say your mother's got cancer, so you go to get born to your mummy, you've got cancerous genes. Well, you, due to past killing, get born to a mummy who has got cancer, so you'll have cancer too. So it's not contradictory, it's another way of putting it. You get the point? Good, I'm happy. Thank you. So we can't just blame our mums. Yes.
Thank you. We create our minds. We
moment by moment, we do things and say things and think things which program us that continues to produce the person we become. And I think Buddha would have liked the concept of programming. It's really delicious.
I see. And we do the work. No one can do it for us.
Yeah, I mean, you can sit there playing piano for 22 years and you can become a very good musician, and I can watch you as much as I like. If I don't start practicing, I will learn zero music.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't force, your practicing a piano can't make me practice piano. I've got to do it. But you can help me practice piano.
That was my question.
That's compassion.
How do Buddhas help us?
Just like that. Exactly like that. How does a doctor help you? Let's say you're the best doctor on the planet. Let's say you've learned every possible antidote to every poison. It's even a possibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've done that, so you've got the power to heal whoever comes to you. That's possible, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's your power. But what if I don't like American girls? I won't come to you, so you can't help me. Your hands are tied. I have to want your methods. You can't force me. I don't want an American lady doctor, thank you. I want a white Persian doctor. If I don't like you, and I haven't got the karma connection with you, I can't see that you're a good doctor. You've got every method, but your hands are tied. I have to want you. It's a dependent arising. I have to ask you. So it depends. That's where dependent arising comes in. You're perfectly qualified to heal me as soon as I open my mouth and allow you. You can't pin me down and force me. You can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. We know these things. That's the point. So the power of a Buddha is from their side. They're infinitely qualified.
What about in day-to-day things?
That's day-to-day, same principle.
You're in the supermarket and you need something. A Buddha is there, can see your need or your karma.
And then?
I mean, how besides asking for teachings or asking for healing, how do we interact?
Huh?
Forget that last part.
Start again. Ask me the question.
If there are Buddhas.
Okay, let's assume Buddha's right, and there are beings like you and me who have accomplished Buddhahood. They no longer need bodies. They're gone beyond bodies. Their minds pervade the universe. They're subtle, all-knowing, all-compassion, all-wise consciousness. That's cool. So they can see the peanuts like you and me need help, so they manifest in bodies looking like you and me. So there they are in bodies. And some old lady with a limp might come up to you and say, and you notice that you need another $1, and she'll give you $1. That could be a Buddha. Of course it could. That's how they can function. They'll walk around like ordinary people, and maybe they'll be the mother next door, maybe they'll be the dog, maybe they'll be the ant. They'll be there to facilitate us. Maybe they want you to create merit, so they'll manifest as a dog and you'll save the dog. That's how they function. They're very tricky because you can't tell. They look like a peanut. They look like a dog. You don't know.
So thank you.
You
I'll think
understand?
about that.
Well, I'll tell you a wonderful story. I love this story about the Dalai Lama. So all the Tibetans say the Dalai Lama's a Buddha. I don't know. I'm not clairvoyant. I like him. Do you understand? But I can't say he's a Buddha. I can have confidence in my own practice he's a Buddha. Do you understand my point? But with certainty, I would not know until I'm a Buddha. That's very evident. I mean, if I don't know any acupuncture, how do I know anything about your acupuncture? I wouldn't have a clue. I've got to know acupuncture too. Then I can judge where you're at, isn't it? It's very logical. So this lovely story, because this is where we get really cosmic now. So this is where it sounds like religion and unbelievable. I'll say it, never mind. I was going to wait till tomorrow, but we'll say it. Your question prompted it. Okay, so when you're an enlightened being, like I said before, you're conscious. I said it to some degree. Your conscious is non-physical. You don't no longer need a bag of bones. You've gone way beyond old bodies. You've gone way beyond that. Your mind is pure, subtle, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-compassionate, all-wise, all-pervasive. It's just like the concept of God. As Lama Zopa says, it's like the concept, the way they talk about God is everywhere. That's Buddha mind. But out of compassion, that mind manifests in bodies, and can be countless bodies. So, all kinds of bodies to suit sentient beings, They don't have to walk around like looking with halos. Be any old style body that's necessary to help sentient beings create merit or to facilitate things. This is how they really help. So all Tibetans would say that Dalai Lama's a Buddha. He will deny it. Of course, he'll just say he's a regular monk. I mean, he can't walk around saying he's a Buddha. People will say, prove it. And you're not going to do that. It'd be embarrassing, ridiculous. So anyway, but everybody who thinks about him says he's a Buddha. So there's this wonderful story Lama Zopa told years ago about soon after the Tibetans came out of Tibet. You know, it was a really difficult time for them, and the Indians were so compassionate and brought the Tibetans in as refugees, you know, such a poor country, but it was so marvellous, so kind of them. The Dalai Lama, 100,000 Tibetans coming in from India, all leaving their country into India. And so when they start to get settled in their, you know, their refugee camps, the Dalai Lama and the older lamas were urgently looking for land in India where they could rebuild the monasteries, which is the place where they can then pass on the knowledge. They didn't want it all to die. You've got to have living beings holding this knowledge, so you need to pass it on to the younger minds, you know. So that was really their major concern. So they were negotiating then with the Tibetan government, with the Indian government, because the Tibetans were up in Dharamsala, okay, when Dalai Lama was based there, the exile government was there. And so the Indian government based in Delhi, and there's just hundreds of thousands of just raw forest down in the south that the Indians were thinking of offering to the Tibetans, so compassionate. So there's this, Dalai Lama's own particular minister from Tibet was going down to Delhi and trying to get meetings, and it was very difficult, Indian bureaucracy being the way it is, you know. So he's very frustrated this particular time. Went back up to the Dalai Lama. It's about a 12-hour journey back up in the train and everything to Dharamsala in the mountains. And His Holiness, he said, I couldn't get a meeting, I was very frustrated. And Dalai Lama basically said, this is paraphrasing, Dalai Lama said, go back down to Delhi, try it away, it'll be fine. So he went back down, 12 hours again, and he got into the office that day, and on that day, the Indian minister's little boy was with his daddy in the office, and the little boy was chatting to the Tibetan, and the little boy expressed the wish for a dog. Well, the Tibetan was delighted to grease the wheels, I'll get you a dog, you know, to make everyone happy. So he went outside, and there was a sadhu, and he had a dog. So can I buy your dog? He said, yep. So he bought the dog, and he came in, he gave the dog, little baby dog, you know, not a big dog, little baby dog, gave it to the boy. He was happy, he went to his daddy, daddy was happy, everything worked. The meeting happened and it was all beautiful. Do you understand? Well, as Lama Zopa said, and these people know these things, so you have to take all this as coming from people's experiences. I didn't make this up. The sadhu and the dog were manifestations of the Dalai Lama's mind. So in the teachings, and it's in the Bodhisattva literature, which is vast, people, this stuff is so vast if you really want to study it seriously. I mean, like Geshe-la, good 25 years they study in the monasteries, you know, studying all the literature, and they don't even touch on all the Indian literature, it's just the Tibetan translations. Even now there are young Americans, like, you know, Elise, Carol, where's Carol? Is she not here? Yeah. Carol, she's gone, where is she? She what? Okay, Carol's son is into 17 years of his studies down south in the monasteries, seriously studying all this literature. It's huge, it's vast, you know. So anyway, even the lowest level bodhisattva, there are 10 stages of development of bodhisattva until you get to Buddhahood. Even the lowest level bodhisattva has the power to manifest their own mind in 100 bodies simultaneously as they progress. Now this fits completely in the Buddhist model. Hearing it initially is like science fiction, but all of it's fitting completely with the nature of the way we're made, how karma works, how the mind works, we're made of the 4 elements. It's all there in this whole kind of body of knowledge. It's got its own internal logic. Do you understand? So by the time you get to becoming a Buddha, you have this effortless capacity to manifest wherever you're needed throughout the universe for sentient beings. Okay, so the fact is that sadhu didn't have to get born in a mummy's womb. They can just manifest as a sadhu, manifest as a dog. Now the point is this, kind of like interesting, that little dog, you know, I think everybody thinks their dog and their cat are Buddhas, I promise you. I've heard everybody says their dog and their cat are Buddhas, you know, whatever. Because they like meditation. It's because, you know, it's quiet and relaxed, that's all, you know, and they like the peace. So anyway, the point is though, this is why I find it sort of funny, but who could know that's a Buddha? I mean, first of all, who can tell the Dalai Lama's a Buddha? Nobody. He's like a nice Tibetan gentleman, you know, getting older now, but still very gorgeous. But who says he's a Buddha? Well, it's got to be our mind knows that. But if you know, so the dog would look like a dog. But it's not going to sort of wink at you in the corner. I'm really the Dalai Lama, you know. It's not going to have a halo. It can even be an ugly dog. Do you understand? It'll look like a dog and pee like a dog and eat like a dog and die like a dog. You would never know. That's how Buddhas help, baby. They have a saying, you don't know who anybody is, so don't judge.
Yes.
Do you understand? It's pretty intense. That's why for me, when I get really intense with the Bodhisattva teachings, they're supposed to be about compassion and love and all softness, but I get more intense when I go about those teachings. I can't cope. Give me emptiness any day. Emptiness I'm really happy talking about. Bodhicitta's too high, too amazing, too outrageous, too shocking, too extraordinary. Do you understand?
I think.
I get nervous talking about the compassion teachings.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, darling?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, I need to think about
Of course you have to think about it. It's just
this.
true.
And from what you've said,
Yeah,
and
that's
what
right.
I think now, I
Yes,
think I've
good,
got
darling.
an
Good, good,
idea.
good. Very good. Okay. Who else would like to ask me a question? Up the front here. Come. And back there. 2 people. Back there, Donna. Go, go, go.
So, you were talking about that with karma and how different, you said thoughts, actions,
Body, speech, and mind.
Body, speech, and mind.
Karma means action of body, speech, and mind, but the key one is mental action, intention.
So, my question is, what about thoughts that don't have intention? That, you know, as we're practicing meditation and controlling single-pointed concentration to try to eliminate the chaos in the mind.
Trying to not eliminate, but
Just
harness it and then eliminate. Eventually eliminate when you're really extreme advanced.
Yeah.
So then all those thoughts, every single tiny thought's creating karma. Yeah.
So, so it's the thoughts, even if they're not, even if
If we don't
the
intend to have
conscious
them.
mind doesn't.
Yeah. No, it's just this habitual minds, a habitual thought just there, programmed in our mind, you know. So now the point is this, there's so much stuff there, and the level of it, this stuff goes to really subtle level. We can even hear that, even what we hear, and it's 1,000 thoughts a second, they even say that in Western psychology, is like easily that. So much of it is just this kind of habit of all those thoughts, habit of all those things, which is why we freak out when we start to meditate, because we can't believe, we think our minds are getting worse, but they're not. But so then, if, say, lots of anger starts to rise, and then you start to buy into the anger and believe it, that's when you start really creating karma. But much of it is just there, leaving imprints because it's there. You can't stop that. It's going to happen. But as more and more so when, let's say, we start to work on our minds and you can't help but having all this, you're mad as hell at your sister and you're struggling in your mind with it. If you're struggling in your mind with it and working with it, you're not creating negative karma. You're working with it. It's purification.
So if we have this unvirtuous thought arise, and we practice, we notice it, but
and then you argue with it and let it go or whatever.
Or just let it go.
That's called purification.
So
and
that doesn't produce
no,
negative karma.
This is a really important point. I mean, first of all, even in the Indian text, they talk about the description, as you know, that the single point of concentration, samadhi, is described in 9 stages of cultivation. And they even say in the text that even at the first stage, one of the signs of progress is that we think we're getting worse. It's only because we're noticing the thoughts. And that scares the life out of us. But we're not getting worse. It's just we're noticing. So the other thing is this. As we practice, because the thoughts are coming more seriously and the stuff comes up, it's like, and then sometimes you can have really difficult periods where you really do think you're getting worse. You think you're getting out of control. It can be very depressing for us. But I remember one of my friends, I always quote this, serious meditator, years and years and years, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, full-on Tantrayana meditator, okay, for years and years, 30 monks a monk and everything. And he told me years ago that at some point he was out of his brain with extra levels of rage and arrogance. He was scared of it. It was so depressing. He was so freaked out. And he went to Lama Zopa. And Rinpoche laughed and laughed and laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. And I say for all of us who mightn't be serious meditators, we all recognize this. So it's a sign of purification because you're disturbing the peace in there.
Yeah.
It's like when you go to the gym. You come back on the first day with muscles you didn't know you had. The pain is really quite incredible, isn't it? But everybody knows immediately it's good pain. You know it's not a bad. If you had that pain sitting watching telly, you're in trouble. You get my point? But we don't understand this with our mind because we can't stand the bad thoughts. So we assume I'm getting worse. And this is one of the commonest things we say. So even just the fact that it takes a long time, we've got to be so humble and patient with ourselves. And if you're dealing with it, I mean, there's 2 things. Let's say I'm mad at you and she's my therapist or my friend. And I go, what's your name? Zach. And I go, this Zach, and he's ugly, he's revolting, I hate him. She goes, yeah, I know, isn't he ugly, horrible, I hate him too. Then that's negative karma. But if I'm struggling and crying, I'm really working with this and I can't stand Zach, but I'm working with it, that's called purification. Okay. So expressing your feelings with a wish to understand them, don't be scared. And we're terrified of our mind, which I don't want to be a naughty girl. No, it's okay. Cry, yell, scream. If you're working with your mind, that's profound. We've got to know that. Do you understand?
I understand. Thank you.
What else, people? 20 to 9.
Good evening.
Where are we? Yes, sweetie pie.
When I come to the moment of peace and I've cleared my mind and I'm, for lack of
You mean you have one of those? Well done.
Yes. A moment, a baby
Good, well done.
a baby bodhicitta
Good,
moment.
go on.
And when you come into the world and something breaks through that,
It makes you annoyed.
the reality, what is the root cause and where do I work on myself to continue and bring that?
I
with
know,
me?
darling. I think there's a way of framing what you're saying that makes it quite difficult, because we do want those nice moments, but then we're shattered when it's broken. So I think it's a bit like this. It's a bit like if you don't know that much music and you go to the piano and you just put your hands on the piano and some lovely sounds come out. Do you understand? It's very nice, isn't it? But then you go to the piano next day because you haven't got much theory, then it doesn't, it's really depressing. So it's nice to have that. And the best you can say is it tells you your potential, but you've got to practice and practice to the point that every time you go to the piano, beautiful sounds come out. It's telling you what your potential is. But it can't last until you've practiced it to perfection. And it's so fragile because we haven't practiced it enough. And that's not really repressing. It's great to treasure those moments. But unfortunately, we tend to think that that's the purpose of meditation, to get one of those moments. No, it can just be hard work. You've got to practice and practice those theories until you play the piano naturally. It's the same with love and compassion, when they are so deep that nothing can disturb them. So it just shows you more work to do. And be happy that it shows you where you're at, and remember that little taste, don't forget it, and just keep working. That's the really best attitude, darling.
That's beautiful. Thank
Good,
you.
fantastic. What else? Anything? Yes.
Thank you for being here, Robina.
All right, sweetheart.
Okay, is my resistance to meditation just pure laziness, or
No,
is there,
you
is
mean
there
sitting
more
with your
involved?
eyes closed? You mean sitting with your eyes closed and your legs crossed? Is that what you mean by meditation? Come on.
Sitting,
No,
not necessarily with my legs crossed, but
listen,
sitting,
no,
to attempting
no,
to focus.
No. We have to know what's right for us. When I first heard the Buddha's teachings, the thought of sitting with my legs crossed and eyes closed was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard in my whole life. I had not the slightest aspiration to do it. Now, there's such a cliched view in the world that if you don't sit and watch your breath, you're not a Buddhist. It's beyond absurd. It's beyond embarrassingly wrong. I always wanted to know my mind, but on the run. I had no interest in sitting quiet. It was not my style or my nature. And even now it's the same. But I want to work on my mind. I've studied the Dharma. I want to know it. I have to speak about it. And I do it many other practices, sometimes on the run. Sometimes I go jogging with not jogging now with my knee, or walking with my earphones. I do my prayers. While I'm having my massage, I'm doing my prayers. While I'm doing other things. There's many ways to skin a cat, as our grandmothers would tell us. So you've got to be really down to earth and know we've all got different styles. One of my friends is a nun, the same years as me. She can't deal with her stuff until she sits down. Everyone's different, darling. Mm-hmm. If you've got to be, I try to do my sadhanas properly and concentrate and read the words, but you know, your mind's busy. At least if you do them and keep your commitments and hold it and keep your practice nice. Not just not do it, but to sit and concentrate is a very particular thing to do, you know. Every one of us maybe could do 5 minutes in the morning. It's a good start if you have nothing else. But if you have other practices like a few mantras or this or that, go for it. There's many ways to practice, darling. We've got to know what's right for us.
Because what I tend to do is, even though I work hard at watching my mind during the day,
Precisely, that's the point.
as I'm going on through
That's
my day,
the real point.
I still beat myself up for, I didn't sit down and meditate today.
Okay, if you have a commitment to do a meditation, then you should beat yourself up. If you didn't have a commitment, then it's absurd. Just relax until you have to shut up. Okay. Do you hear my point?
Yeah, absolutely.
By commitment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If you've got a commitment to do a practice, you do your practice. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have, and you've got to know, everyone is so different. Every one of us is so different. One of my friends, Rene, the Swiss monk, he, from the time he first heard the teaching, same time as me, he went straight into doing studies and retreat. He's been doing for 45 years. Everyone is retreat. Everyone's different. Everyone's different. We've got to find the style that works for us. I've done hardly any serious, meditation retreats in my life. But I do lots of other things, and in the end, the bottom line is to create merit and purify your mind. And you've got to find the most powerful actions to do that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be sitting on your bottom is just wasting time being self-centered. Mm-hmm. It's not in its nature. Watching your breath is not even virtuous at all. Mm. It's got to be the motivation. So helping others is the most powerful practice. Working for the centre is the most powerful practice. Me doing my editing, you know, I'm getting old. I am old, not getting old. I am old now. And however long I've got to live, I want to use my eyes, my brain, and my fingers as long as I can to edit my Lama's teachings. I have no interest in sitting in my stupid bottom trying to work out my own mind. I'd rather edit their books and do it that way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Really, and I'm not trying to be controversial. There's just many cliches views about what practice is, you know.
Thank you.
We need discipline. So check if you're not disciplined, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. What else, people? 8:45. 15 more minutes. I mean, whatever you like. If I'm Lama Zopa, I'll keep you till midnight. But I value my reputation too much. I won't do it, I promise. For my sake, not for yours. Yep.
First, they say we have so many thoughts per second. I mean, what's that number?
Oh, well, the West says like 1,000 thoughts a second. Buddha would agree.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I can kind of see a few of those thoughts.
Well, I'm glad, honey. That's your job.
But so to fill in the rest of the 1,000 or so is, I was just kind of wondering, is it like how you're thinking about your world that you're in? I mean, the space that surrounds you, the colors, the shapes.
What?
Are those the thoughts that are going
no,
through your
darling,
head
they're
that are filling up the space?
They're habits. They're like residual. The thoughts that are racing from the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep is just residual thoughts. Just uncontrolled energy, because we've never controlled our mind. We don't have such techniques in our culture, which is why concentration meditation is incredible if we can learn to do it, seriously learn to do it. It's only when you've really got samadhi, concentration, that you can have literally effortless control over every single thought. Now that's inconceivable in our culture, but that's what we're capable of. So even some semblance, you see, that's the point about concentration is the direct method to get the mind to be subdued. It's the direct method. But by practicing every day, by serving the center, by doing some mantras, by doing some purification, by doing all their powerful purification practices, you also subdue your mind in that way. Let's also see your mind in that way. There's many methods to get to see your mind at the grosser level that most of us will ever see it, unless we do serious samadhi. You with me? We can't expect to get controlled mind with serious samadhi, but it's just a question of habit over the years of wanting to know what's going on inside, catching yourself 1,000 times a day, hearing the anger, having the fight, owning the anger, hearing it, more and more accountability, more and more accountability, more and more awareness, more and more wish to see your mind, more and more, constantly coming back to that. And that just seeing your mind means hearing the anger, hearing the jealousy, hearing the resentment, hearing the self-centeredness, hearing how the word I is the center of all of our stories. Wanting people to see us, wanting people to like us, wanting this, how dare he this, why not do this, upset this is not fair this. Just this blah, 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 endlessly. Beginning to hear it more clearly. We can do so much of that just by being clear in our own mind every day. While you're doing the dishes, while you're working, while you're driving. We're mostly unconscious during those times, just blah, 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 not, Do you understand? It's a full-on job, yes. Being your own therapist, I promise. And being your own therapist in Buddhism isn't going back to the past. It means hearing your thoughts now and beginning to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues. That's the powerful point.
Okay. Thanks.
You with me?
I'm with you.
Slowly. Okay. Where? Back there? Up here? Okay, whatever. Go, darling, yes.
Because you say we have to develop our wisdom before we go help others. We help ourselves.
Yeah, and develop, just to say it again, developing wisdom at this first stage is lessening your attachment, lessening your anger, lessening your anxiety, lessening your self-centeredness, and becoming more content and more clear in yourself. That's the first stage of the so-called wisdom wing. In that way you get more clear about yourself, and then you can see others more clearly now, not through the lenses of your own rubbish. That's the wisdom wing first. Yes.
So in Hinayana, I went to
This is the Hinayana. This is the Hinayana we're describing here.
Yes.
Yes.
But when I come to Mahayana here,
yes.
I feel like we are rushed into becoming bodhicittas and tongueling practice.
I understand.
I feel like most of us are not ready.
I understand.
And then we not everybody has studied suttas or the teachings in
That's
the
right.
84,000 teachings.
That's right, exactly.
So I sometimes feel overwhelmed.
Do you?
With
So
the compassion. as
So
I
I
spoke other
understand,
day.
but you see, one of the things I think when we understand karma, which of course is right at the beginning, then if we realize that just thinking something, reading something, hearing it, leaves an imprint, we should be very happy with that. Not to force us to try and become that. I mean, I just even think about bodhicitta is too much for me, but just to think about it, to say the words, that sows a seed in the mind. So the real one is just to leave imprints in the mind, to leave a habit in the mind, to leave the seed in the mind. That's good enough. That's marvelous. And I mean, it happens to be, I'm very amazed that people love Tonglen. So it's okay, we've all got different lineages, we've got different attractions to things, you know. And each of us can, I mean, in each of us as we progress, we might focus on more things. That's perfectly fine. Because I mean, we haven't even anyway perfected even the first stages. You're right, of course you're not. But I think we can do a little bit of everything. But the crucial piece is we know we've got to do all of them eventually. Do you understand what I'm saying? And don't be overwhelmed. It's not expecting us to be these things, just leaving the tendency in the mind. How marvelous to even think. Even just to have the thought of metta, just to have the thought, I'd like to benefit others. That goes in your mind, that leaves an imprint. Be delighted with it. Do you understand? I think for most of it, including the first stages, you know. And most of us won't study all of it. So that's okay. We get it. Put the imprints in. That's enough. I think that's okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Be content with it. Okay. Don't feel forced. I understand. Okay. Yes. What else, people? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Donna had mentioned at the beginning that there's retreats in Tibet that you lead. And I was wondering, I often hear about
Tibet's what?
Or Nepal.
Oh, you mean my postcards on my commercial?
Yes.
I should do my commercial. Let me do my commercial first.
I'm giving you a chance to plug it right
I know,
here.
but you just... Okay, there's two postcards out there. One, the pilgrimage we've been doing, and so many people in Raleigh have got, I think you almost have to have a pilgrimage group in this centre, because so many of you have been on the pilgrimage. It's in 2001 we've been doing these, and they've raised money for Liberation Prison Project, you know, that non-profit that I began, that I ran for many years, that now John is helping with, other people are helping with, and I don't run anymore, but I still lead the pilgrimages. I think it's about my 17th this year, and I never get bored. So basically it's like 17 or 18 days. We start in Kathmandu, we go to Kopan, stay in the best places, so they get the best of both worlds, the nicest hotels, so you feel all great. Then we go to Kopan, and then we do the holy places in Kathmandu Valley. Then we fly to Lukla, Lumbini, where Buddha was born. And then we get our Indian bus, and we spend then the next 2 weeks in India. And it's amazing on our buses, isn't it? I know the bus journeys are amazing, aren't they? Just amazing. And we go to Shravasti, where Buddha and his disciples practiced meditation, and during the rainy season for 3 months every year for 25 years. Then we go to where Buddha, we stayed 2 nights, and we go 2 nights to Kushinagar, where he passed away. Then we go to Rajgir, where he taught on the Heart Sutra up on the hill. The Vajra Peak, and then we go to Bodh Gaya, where he got enlightened. Then we go to Varanasi, where he taught the Four Noble Truths, and then we go back to Kathmandu. And it's just an amazing experience every year. People love it. They have special dreams, special meditations. And I think if you're a Buddhist, it's a really good thing to do, to go to these holy places where the Buddha was before you die. There's my advertisement. Then the other one.
Now my question?
No, yeah, what's your question? No, I'll do my other ad first.
Okay.
Then you go back. The other one is 4 years now. It's our 4th year next year. It's leading a trek up to the mountains, 4,500 metres above Nanshe Bazaar in the Himalayas, where Lama Zopa's cave is from his past life, and also this life as a retreat centre. And I was a lady in Sydney, Christine, asked me 4 years ago to lead it, and I've never walked up a hill in my life. Forget about a mountain. And I'm ridiculous, you know, I'm old. I was shocked. But I did it the first year. I thought I'd die. But then the second year, I took the helicopter up each step of the way, and the third year as well, and again next year I will. But then we go up there, the final bit you walk, and then we stay for 6 days up there. It's like 10 below sometimes. It's amazing up in the mountains where they all meditate. And we do a retreat up there, and then we walk down again. And that's raising money for Lama Zopa's place up there, and people just love it. We get like 30 people book up every year. So that's the other advertisement. Okay, and the postcards are out there. Go on.
Thank you.
What's your question?
So I've never been to any of those special places.
Good.
And I've never been to any place in the East. So my question is, if you know, we're working on our mind, and that's our job, but we're here. We're always where we are.
That's right.
What is the benefit? What's the benefit to going to those special places?
I think because the Buddha went there.
Is it
I think
the
if you like
mystique.
Buddhism, and even people who come who aren't Buddhists, people somehow, I can't get over, they have such a special experience going to these places. Special meditation, special dream, there's something very special. And the Indians are so kind, they've kept these places like oases. They're beautiful. And it's just a nice, it's a lovely place just to have fun and enjoy yourself and go silk shopping in Varanasi and go to Kathmandu and just see new things and go through India and go to the chai stalls and have a samosa for like 5 cents and a cup of chai for 5 cents, instead of $5. And it's just a very powerful experience, and doing it in a lovely group, and the people all really go beautifully together. The groups always work so harmoniously. It's a very special experience. And it raises money for the prison project. That's another reason. $500 a head goes to the prison project. Over the years, it's raised about $100,000 for the prisoners, which is incredible. Do you understand? Yes. That's some benefit. And you have fun. Yeah. All right? You have me for 17 days. Whether that's fun or not, I'm not sure. Okay. Who else? Yes. The trek's only 15 days. And because we're staying in cheap places like $2 a night, so it's a lot cheaper. Yeah. Who else? Back in the back there. Yes, sweetheart.
Good evening.
Hello.
Back to the karma question.
Yes.
And I was wondering if we take karma from the good karma and the bad karma into the next lives. Do we work on issues in that life, and if we clear the issue, if it's a negative issue, does that clear it for future generations?
It clears for your next. If you get rid of it, you got rid of it, babe. Absolutely.
Or for the family?
No, not
Everybody,
family. It's you.
It's their own. Everyone
put
has
it this
their
way.
own.
Put it this way. If you've got a particular issue with a sister in this life, you've got strong karma together to sort. So she might not even work it out. But if you work on your part and you forgive and you love her and you really get rid of it, you'll meet her again. She might be unhappy, but you've done your bit. You're fine. You've cleared it with you. And if you both do it, that's even better.
So
you will
everyone
meet again for sure.
Everyone's journey is their own.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, and we've got different karma with different people in different lifetimes. We can bump into the same people, but maybe it's in another relationship next time, or maybe another whole group of people in another place,
Do we travel in pods? No,
I understand, darling. No, not so much. You could say that, no, we've got there's two different ways that karma is. We'll go into more detail. I don't know if you're coming tomorrow. Never mind.
Yes, I am.
But, you do your own thing every second. Minute by minute, you're programming your mind, you're purifying your mind, you're cleaning up your issues, you're growing your virtue and your goodness, you're programming yourself beautifully. So then other people who are along similar to you, if a bunch of you doing it together, then you're going to meet as a group together, for sure. We here are a group, right? We don't remember meeting each other in this life. We might not meet again. But we can say we've come from, there's some karma between all of us at a particular time. Could be 100 lives ago where we were together in a group, obviously talking about something like this. It wasn't about killing people. Do you understand? So in that sense, we come together in groups, we do things in groups, and we experience things in groups, both suffering and happiness.
Okay, thank you.
Family is just one example of a group, but a race is a group, women is a group, men is a group, Asians are a group. You understand what I'm saying? Poor people. All these many, many groups we do things with each other. Do you understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're wonderful.
Well, I'm a part of me maybe.
The part that I'm experiencing.
Okay, very good. I'm very happy.
Thank you. I'm a musician.
A physician.
Musician.
A musician. Well done.
I hope. And
Yes.
I work at it.
Yes.
And you use music very often threaded through your discourses.
It's true because of my own experience, my mummy and me and everything, my own experience.
Right, I get that.
Yes.
And you talk about Bach.
That's right.
And
exactly.
I played Bach
how
my
marvelous.
whole life.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yes, I'm happy too.
Good.
And my question is,
Uh-huh.
do you find music to be intrinsically beneficial
I understand.
toward this path
I
or
understand.
towards any path?
I understand.
That's my
I understand.
question.
I think it's at different stages. If I'm in the first stage of practice where I want to control my body and speech and really then work on my mind and I want to go into retreat, then there's no way I would want to listen to music because I'm trying to harness my energy. But then when I get to the next stage and I want to be beneficial to others, then it's the most, to have beautiful music that lifts people up is the most marvelous way to help people, isn't it? You can't say it's not. I mean, if it's destructive music coming from rage and anger and destruction and to stir people's misery up, then thank you very much. Keep it to yourself. Do you understand? So if it's like, especially like people like Bach, I mean, you can't help but believe he was a holy being, you know. I mean, there he was, 23 children, trying to write his things every day, keeping up with it. He was unbelievable. I mean, he felt like a holy being, didn't he? You read something, just recently listened to one of his cantatas, you know, that one, I forget the name of it. So moving. It's like incredible, this stuff. And often I'm more moved by Western religious music than I am by sometimes Tibetan, because it's so unusual and antiquated. You should get my CD out there. Did you see my CD? Okay, I'm not trying to be rude, but somebody, it's out there. This one. There's a few copies left, but you might. It's like we did it with a friend in Australia. She heard me sing and she said, "I recognise a trained voice." I mean, I haven't sung for 50 years except my prayers. And so we worked together for a couple of years in her studio in Sydney, and we took some Tibetan prayers and we did them like Gregorian. It's a cappella, and it's a bit, and we made up parts. And so you'll see it's a choir of Robina. Give the man. You can have it. It's a gift to you from me. Okay? Now you listen. Okay? It's a choir of Robinas. Okay? Thank you. What's your name? Jonathan. Can I hear your music anywhere?
I'll bring a cello tomorrow.
Good. Yeah, we should have. We should have a little break during lunch and have cello. Yes, Jonathan, bring it.
I will.
Then we'll have a lunch during lunch break. You can have a cello, little cello performance.
It'll be Bach.
But so amazing! I'll come back early. Absolutely. Well done. Good. Okay. Well, it's time to go home. It's 9:01. Anybody else? Was there anybody else with a microphone? Is enough. And we'll stop on a high note like that with Jonathan. So thank you, everybody. We do a little prayer to finish. So here we've been 2 hours. So think of it this way. There's not a millisecond of any thought that we've had that's gone astray. We've done all this programming. So we think we also sown as many seeds as there are moments. So we think how fantastic. We just programmed our mind for a couple of hours. How marvelous, you know. Be delighted with it. So we think maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our practice, whatever that might be, and our own style, you know, to help us develop our amazing potential for our sake and the sake of others. Thinking like this. Kewa dinyu dudai lama sangye drub gyurne drowa chikyang Malupa de sala gopashok Jangchob semchog rinpoche maki panam kegyuchig kepanyampa mepayang Gong ne gong du pabashok. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
I forgot to mention earlier, if you are coming tomorrow, I strongly advise you make a sandwich tonight or stop at Whole Foods and pick something up and stick around for lunch so we can all chat. And now we have the extra benefit of Jonathan's concert. So, pardon me? Yeah, and tomorrow we're here from 10 to 4, and we'll take a lunch break at noon. Thanks.